A poor girl sells artwork to fund her chemo treatments, painting through trembling hands while cancer ravages her body. But when a single dad accidentally stumbles into her world, what he does next gave her a reason to keep living. Before we continue, please tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. The crash of paintings scattering across hot pavements split the Tuesday afternoon silence on South Congress Avenue. Megan Brooks watched in horror as her watercolors, 6 weeks of work, skittered across the sidewalk like broken dreams. Her knees hit the concrete hard, sending a sharp pain through her already aching body, but she barely noticed. All she could see were the paintings, some now bearing footprints from passing strangers who didn't even slow down. "No, no," she cried, her voice cracked as she reached for a portrait of sunflowers, now torn down the middle. This one was supposed to pay for Thursday's treatment. That one, the birds in flight, was meant to cover her anti-nausea medication. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," a man's voice cut through her panic. "I wasn't watching where I was going. Please, let me help." Megan looked up to see a well-dressed man in his late 30s already gathering her scattered artwork with careful hands. Behind him, her display easel lay sideways, the victim of his accidental collision. But it wasn't anger that flooded through her. It was exhaustion, bone-deep, soul-crushing exhaustion that made her want to just sit there on that hot sidewalk and give up. "It's fine," she managed, though her trembling hands betrayed her. "Accidents happen."
Nolan Rivers froze as he noticed her hands, how they shook not from emotion, but from something deeper. Then he saw the medical alert bracelet, the careful way she moved, like every motion cost her something precious. "These are incredible," he said softly, holding up a painting of a small girl releasing a paper airplane into a sunset sky. The child's expression captured pure hope, watching her creation soar into an uncertain future. "Did you paint all of these?" "Every one." Megan pushed herself to her feet, swaying slightly. The afternoon sun felt like hammers against her skull. "Did you paint all of these?" "Every one. Though, after today, I might need to paint faster. Rent doesn't wait for clumsy artists." She tried for humor, but Nolan heard the desperation beneath it. He watched her steady herself against the overturned table, noticed how her breathing seemed labored, despite the minimal exertion. "How much for this one?" He held up the paper airplane painting. $40. Then, seeing his expensive watch, his tailored shirt, she quickly added, "But I could do 30 if—" "I'll take 5 paintings. $200. The words hung in the air between them. Megan's eyes widened, and for a moment Nolan thought she might refuse. Pride flickered across her face, warring with need. "You don't have to. I'm not being charitable," though they both knew he was lying. "My daughter loves art. She's 9, lost her mom 3 years ago. Art became her way of processing things. These would mean something to her." The mention of a motherless child softened something in Megan's expression. She understood loss, understood how art could be a lifeline when everything else felt like drowning. "All right," she whispered, "but you choose them. Each one should mean something." As Nolan selected paintings, the paper airplane, a woman dancing in rain, children chasing fireflies, a tree growing through concrete, and 2 hands reaching for each other across a divide, Megan carefully wrapped each one. Her movements were slow, deliberate, like she was conserving energy for something more important. "I'm here every day, 7 to 4, unless—" "Unless?" "It's a treatment day. Chemo. Every Thursday and Monday. Makes Tuesday and Friday sales pretty important." A medical bill slipped from her bag as she reached for tape. The number at the bottom stopped Nolan's heart. $47,000. Past due stamps covered it like accusations. "I should go," Megan said quickly, stuffing the bill back into her bag. "The afternoon medication makes me drowsy if I don't take it with food, and I've already missed the window." When did you last eat? The question surprised them both. Megan blinked, trying to remember. This morning, I think? Maybe yesterday? The nausea makes it hard to... Without a word, Nolan pulled out his phone. There's a food truck around the corner. Best tacos in Austin. What can you eat? I can't let you... You're not letting me. I'm insisting. Besides, you just made a major sale. We should celebrate.
20 minutes later, they sat on a bench in the shade, Megan nibbling carefully at a plain quesadilla while Nolan pretended not to watch her struggle with each bite. Between them, the wrapped canings created a small barrier that neither seemed eager to maintain. Lymphoma, she said suddenly. Stage 3. Diagnosed 8 months ago, 2 weeks after graduating from art school. Cosmic joke, right? 4 years preparing for a future that might not exist? Don't say that. Why not? It's true. The doctors give me 50-50 odds if I can complete treatment, but that's a big if. Each session costs $3,000. Insurance covers some, but not enough. Not nearly enough. She talked about her parents then, how they died in a boating accident when she was 16. How she'd used every penny of her inheritance for art school, believing she was investing in her future. How she'd been so ready to take on the world, portfolio in hand, until the first symptom appeared. A swollen lymph node she'd ignored for too long. So now I paint, she continued, gesturing at her makeshift stand. $7 here, $20 there, sometimes $40 if I'm lucky. It's not enough, but it's something. It's doing something. Nolan understood that need to do something, anything, when life spiraled beyond control. After Rachel's diagnosis, he'd reorganized their entire house, created spreadsheets for medications, built a support schedule that accounted for every minute. None of it had saved her, but the doing had kept him sane. My daughter, Ivy, he said. She started painting after her mom died. Wouldn't talk for 3 months, just painted. Oceans of blue paint, like she was trying to drown the grief in color. Did it help? Eventually. An art therapist told me that children process trauma through creation, that making something beautiful from pain is how humans have always survived. He paused. I think that's what you're doing too. Not just selling art, creating hope. Megan's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Hope doesn't pay for chemotherapy. No, Nolan agreed, but sometimes hope brings something better than money. That night, Nolan couldn't sleep. He stood in Ivy's room, watching his daughter breathe, surrounded by her own paintings. The walls were covered in them, purple skies, orange trees, people with rainbow skin. In the corner hung the 5 paintings he'd bought from Megan, already finding their place in Ivy's colorful world. Daddy? Ivy stirred. Why are you sad? He hadn't realized he was crying. Not sad, sweetheart, just thinking. About Mommy? About someone who needs help. Like Mommy needed help? Yeah, like that. Then we help them, Ivy said simply. That's what people do. They help.
The next morning, after dropping Ivy at summer art camp, Nolan returned to South Congress. Megan was there, as he somehow knew she would be, painting even as she sat beside her display. Her hand trembled slightly as she worked, but her focus never wavered. Back already? She looked up with surprise. Don't tell me you need more paintings. Actually, I have a proposition. Megan's brush stilled. She'd heard that before. Men who thought they could buy more than art, people who confused desperation with availability. Seeing her expression, Nolan quickly continued. My company needs artwork for our new office space. 27 blank walls in the lobby, conference rooms, break areas. I showed your work to our design committee yesterday. They're interested. That's very kind, but there's more. We want to host an art showing in our building. Feature local artists, invite clients, make it an event. You'd be the featured artist. The hope that flickered in her eyes nearly broke him. Then, just as quickly, it died. I can't. She set down her brush. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't need pity. I don't need some tech executive playing savior because he feels guilty about having money while I'm dying on a street corner. The words hung between them like a challenge. Nolan could have been offended, could have walked away. Instead, he pulled over a plastic crate and sat down beside her. "You're right," he said simply. "I do feel guilty. I have excellent health insurance. My bank account could cover your medical bills without me noticing. That's not fair, and it makes me angry." Megan blinked, not expecting honesty.
"But this isn't about guilt," he continued. "When my wife was sick, I pushed everyone away. Thought accepting help meant I was failing her. Our friends wanted to organize meal trains, fundraisers, support groups. I refused it all. Told myself we were fine, that we could handle it alone." He paused, watching a tourist examine one of Megan's paintings. "Rachel died on a Tuesday. Ordinary Tuesday, nothing special about it. And you know what she said that morning? She said she wished she could have seen our community come together. That she wanted Ivy to remember people rallying around us, not just the isolation of illness. I robbed her of that. Robbed Ivy of seeing how people can lift each other up." "I don't even know you," Megan whispered. "No, but you know what it's like to face something bigger than yourself. And I know what it's like to watch someone fight that battle. Maybe that's enough." She was quiet for a long moment, adding delicate strokes to her painting. A girl standing at the edge of a cliff, paper wings strapped to her arms, about to leap. "What if I can't finish it? The show, I mean. What if I get too sick?" "Then we'll display whatever you've created, even if it's just one painting, even if it's unfinished. Sometimes the most beautiful art is incomplete." Over the next 3 weeks, something shifted in the rhythm of South Congress Avenue. Nolan became a fixture at Megan's stand, bringing lunch he claimed was extra from a meeting, sitting with her during slow afternoons while he worked on his laptop. They talked about everything and nothing. Ivy's latest camp creation, Megan's memories of art school, the way light changed throughout the day.
"You know, people are starting to talk," Megan said one afternoon, gesturing at a group of regular vendors who watched them with knowing smiles. "About what? The tech executive who's fallen for the dying artist? It's like a Nicholas Sparks novel." Nolan's fingers stilled on his keyboard. They hadn't acknowledged the growing connection between them, the way their conversations had become the highlight of his days, how Megan had started looking for him each morning. "Would that be so terrible?" he asked quietly. "It would be cruel. To Ivy, to you. You've already lost one person to illness. You don't need—" "Stop." The word came out sharper than intended. "You don't get to decide what I need, or what Ivy needs. She met you yesterday, remember?" The memory made Megan smile despite herself. Ivy had burst from Nolan's car like a tiny hurricane, immediately demanding to know everything about every painting. She'd sat cross-legged on the sidewalk for an hour, watching Megan work, asking endless questions about color and technique and inspiration. "She's extraordinary," Megan said. "She likes you. Asked if you could teach her to paint clouds. Apparently clouds are very difficult." "They are," Megan agreed. "All that nothing, trying to become something." The metaphor hung between them, unexamined but understood. If you've ever witnessed a moment when kindness transforms into something bigger than itself, you know it doesn't happen all at once. It builds slowly, like a painting coming to life one brushstroke at a time. Comment below if you've ever witnessed or experienced this kind of unexpected magic. I read every single one of your stories.
The art show preparation consumed the next 2 weeks. Nolan's colleagues, initially skeptical about dedicating company resources to an unknown artist, became invested as they learned Megan's story. Not the cancer part, Nolan kept that private at Megan's request, but her talent, her dedication, her vision. What started as a simple display became an event. The marketing team created professional promotional materials. The facilities group transformed the building's lobby into a gallery space. Local media picked up the story of a tech company supporting local artists, though they missed the real story happening in the quiet moments. Like when Megan had to leave setup early for an emergency treatment, and Nolan patted her back as she vomited in the parking lot afterward. Or when Ivy insisted on helping Megan pick out a wig for the show, the two of them laughing in the medical supply store as they tried increasingly ridiculous styles. Or the night before the show, when Megan called Nolan at 2 a.m., terrified that she wasn't strong enough to stand for 3 hours of mingling. "Then you'll sit," he'd said simply. "We'll get you a throne. Every queen needs a throne." "I'm not a queen. I'm just a sick girl who paints." "You're an artist who happens to be fighting an illness. There's a difference." The morning of the show, Megan stood in front of her bathroom mirror, hands shaking as she applied makeup to hide the hollows chemotherapy had carved in her face. The dress, borrowed from Nolan's sister, hung loose on her shrinking frame. The wig Ivy had chosen, a soft auburn that reminded Megan of her natural color before treatment, felt heavy on her sensitive scalp. A knock at her apartment door interrupted her preparation. Outside stood Nolan and Ivy, both dressed formally, but carrying a large box. "Special delivery," Ivy announced. "Daddy said you needed courage, so I made you some."
Inside the box was a handmade crown, constructed from wire and painted paper flowers. Each flower had a word written in Ivy's careful handwriting: brave, strong, artist, friend, hope. "For your throne," Evie explained solemnly. "Queens need crowns." Megan sank to her knees, pulling the girl into a fierce hug. Over Ivy's shoulder, she met Nolan's eyes, seeing her own emotions reflected there. Love and fear tangled so tightly they became indistinguishable. "Thank you," she whispered, unclear if she was addressing the child or the father or both. The office building at 7 p.m. looked nothing like its daytime corporate self. Soft lighting transformed the stark lobby into an intimate gallery. Megan's paintings lined the walls, each accompanied by a small placard she'd written explaining the inspiration behind it. The paper airplane painting held the place of honor, centered on the main wall with professional spotlighting. People began arriving at 6:30. First a trickle, then a flood. Nolan's colleagues, clients, Austin art collectors he'd somehow convinced to attend. The local news crew set up in a corner, preparing for their human interest segment. But Megan saw none of it, focused instead on breathing through the pain that had settled in her bones that morning and refused to leave. "You okay?" Nolan appeared at her elbow with a glass of water and 2 pain pills he'd learned to carry for her. "Terrified," she admitted, accepting the medication gratefully. "What if they hate it? What if no one buys anything? What if—" "You look around," he interrupted gently. "Really look." She did. A couple stood transfixed before her storm painting, the woman wiping tears. A group of Nolan's colleagues debated the meaning behind her abstract piece representing treatment side effects. Ivy held court near the paper airplane painting, explaining to anyone who would listen that it was about her specifically. "Thank you very much." "They see you," Nolan said softly. "Your vision, your heart, your fight. They see it all."
Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. A woman in an elegant suit stood near the main painting. "I'm Helen Hunters from the Hammond Gallery. I've been observing tonight, watching how people respond to these works. Art is meant to move us, to change us, to remind us of our humanity. Megan Brooks's work does all of this and more." The crowd quieted, turning toward Helen. "The Hammond Gallery would like to offer Ms. Brooks a solo exhibition in our spring showcase. We believe her voice is one Austin needs to hear." The room erupted in applause, but Megan barely heard it. The words echoed in her mind. Spring showcase. Spring was 8 months away. They were offering her a future, assuming she had one. "Additionally," Helen continued, "we'd like to purchase 3 pieces tonight for our permanent collection." Someone started a bidding war over the storm painting. Another collector claimed 5 pieces for her private collection. The news crew rushed to interview Megan, who could barely form coherent sentences through her shock. But the biggest moment came when Nolan stepped to the microphone they'd set up for speeches. "6 weeks ago," Nolan began,
his voice steady, despite the emotion underneath. "I literally stumbled into Megan's art stand. What I found wasn't just beautiful paintings, but an artist whose courage humbles me daily." He paused, finding Megan in the crowd. She stood near her throne. They'd actually gotten her a vintage armchair, Ivy's crown slightly askew on her head. "Many of you don't know that Megan creates these works while battling lymphoma. Every dollar from her sales goes directly to treatment that insurance won't cover. She paints through pain, through nausea, through exhaustion that would break most of us. She transforms suffering into beauty, despair into hope."
Several people gasped, others reached for their checkbooks. But Nolan wasn't finished. "Tonight, I'm honored to announce that between the sales and the generous contributions many of you have made, we've raised enough to cover Megan's medical expenses in full." The number appeared on a screen behind him, $73,000. "Furthermore, my company is commissioning Megan to create a permanent installation for our headquarters, ensuring she has stable income during her recovery." Megan's legs gave out. She sank into her throne, Ivy's crown tumbling to the floor as she covered her face with both hands. Her shoulders shook with sobs that came from somewhere deeper than gratitude. Through her tears, she saw Nolan approaching, Ivy's hand in his. The crowd parted for them, creating a path that felt both endless and instant. When he reached her, Nolan knelt beside the chair, taking her trembling hands in his steady ones. "You did this," he said quietly, "just for her. Your art, your courage, your refusal to give up. We just gave you the stage." "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "Then don't. Just paint. Just live. Just be." Ivy climbed into Megan's lap, retrieving her crown from the floor and carefully placing it back on her head. "Better," the girl declared. "Queens shouldn't cry, unless they're happy tears. Are they happy tears?" "The happiest," she managed, pulling both Ivy and Nolan into an embrace that said everything words couldn't. A photographer captured the moment, the dying artist, the widowed father, the motherless child, creating a family from shared loss and unexpected love. The image would later win awards, be featured in galleries, become an icon of hope. But in that moment, it was just three people holding on to each other in a room full of art and possibility.
The months that followed blurred together like watercolors bleeding into each other. Megan's treatment intensified, made possible by the funds raised. Nolan drove her to every appointment, Ivy creating get-well cards for each one. The side effects worsened before they improved. Days when Megan couldn't lift a paintbrush, nights when the pain kept her screaming into pillows. But there were other moments too. Teaching Ivy to paint clouds on good days, quiet dinners at Nolan's house when she felt strong enough, the first scan showing tumor shrinkage, the second showing more improvement, the third that used the word remission. The Hammond Gallery exhibition opened on a perfect March evening, almost exactly a year after that first collision on South Congress. Megan stood before her newest painting, the centerpiece of the show. It depicted three figures flying paper airplanes in a field of wildflowers, their faces turned toward a sky full of possibility. "Is that us?" Ivy asked, now 10 and several inches taller, her own artistic skills flourishing under Megan's tutelage. "What do you think?" Megan replied, her hair now growing back in soft waves, her cheeks full with returned health. "I think it's our family portrait," Ivy declared, "but you made us all have wings." "Hidden wings," Nolan corrected, wrapping an arm around them each, the kind you only see when the light hits just right. A reporter approached, asking Megan about her journey, about the message in her work. "People ask me if cancer gave me perspective, but it wasn't the illness that changed me. It was discovering that when you're brave enough to accept help, you don't just survive, you find reasons to thrive." She looked at Nolan and Ivy, then back to the reporter. "I started selling art to fund chemotherapy. to buy more time. But what I found was so much more than time. I found proof that strangers can become family, that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, that sometimes the very thing that breaks you apart is what allows the light to enter. And the paper airplanes? The reporter asked, gesturing at the recurring motif in her work. Hope, Ivy answered before Megan could. They're about launching hope into the unknown and trusting it will find somewhere safe to land. As the gallery filled with admirers, collectors, and critics praising Megan's evolution as an artist, she stood quietly with her chosen family. Nolan's hand found hers, fingers intertwining with the ease of 1,000 such moments. Ivy leaned against her side, already planning their next collaborative piece. Remember that first day, when I knocked over your stand? Best accident of my life. Mine too. They stood together, watching people discover the stories within each painting, seeing viewers moved to tears by the raw honesty of her work. Several pieces already bore sold stickers, ensuring Megan's financial security for years to come. But more importantly, the walls held proof of a journey from desperation to hope, from isolation to love, from merely surviving to truly living. Later that evening, as the gallery emptied and they prepared to leave, Megan paused before that first painting, the girl with the paper airplane, watching it soar into the sunset. The same painting Nolan had bought that sweltering Tuesday, back when she was just trying to make it through another day. I was her, she said softly, launching desperate hope into an indifferent sky. And now? Asked Nolan. Now I know the secret. She turned to face him and Ivy, her eyes bright with tears and joy. The airplane doesn't have to land perfectly. It just has to land somewhere with people ready to help it fly again.
6 months later, the Austin Chronicle would run a follow-up story. The headline read, "Local artist Megan Brooks marries tech executive who saved her life." But they got it wrong, as newspapers often do with love stories. Nolan didn't save Megan's life. They saved each other. In a small ceremony surrounded by the art community that had rallied around them, with Ivy as the flower girl wearing her own handmade crown, Megan and Nolan exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Nolan promised to be her strength on the days when painting felt impossible. Megan promised to teach him that beauty could exist alongside pain. They both promised Ivy that love wasn't about replacing what was lost, but about building something new from the pieces that remained. The reception was held in the same office building where that first art show had changed everything. But this time, the walls displayed a new collection, paintings Megan and Ivy had created together, depicting their blended family's journey. The centerpiece was a massive canvas showing 3 sets of hands releasing a paper airplane together, the sunset behind them, not an ending, but a beginning. "You know what the best part is?" Ivy said during her toast, wise beyond her 10 years. "Megan didn't just become my new mom. She became the person my first mom would have wanted for us. Someone who understands that the worst things that happen to you don't have to be the end of your story." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. As the evening wound down, Megan found herself standing where she'd stood that first night, in front of her paintings, surrounded by love she couldn't have imagined when she was selling art on a street corner. The medical bills were paid. The cancer was in remission. She had a family, a career, a future that stretched beyond the next treatment.
"No regrets?" Nolan asked, joining her. "One," she admitted. "I wish I'd priced my paintings higher that first day. $40 was definitely too low." He laughed, pulling her close. "I'd have paid anything." "I know," she said softly. "That's how I knew you were dangerous. You looked at my art and saw me. The real me. Not the sick girl, not the charity case. Just me. And you saw us. Not the widower and the grieving child, just 2 people who needed to remember that beauty exists." They stood together, watching the Austin skyline glitter through the windows. Somewhere out there, on South Congress Avenue, another struggling artist might be packing up their stand for the night. Another single parent might be wrestling with how to help their child process grief. Another person might be facing odds that seemed insurmountable.
But Megan and Nolan knew something those people didn't yet know. That sometimes the universe conspires to create collisions that look like accidents, but are actually answered prayers. That selling artwork on a street corner can lead to gallery exhibitions. That a widowed father buying a painting can become the love of your life. That a little girl's need for a mother can help a dying woman find her reason to live. If you've made it this far, you've witnessed something extraordinary. Not just a love story, but proof that humanity's capacity for kindness can transform the darkest moments into the brightest futures. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that miracles don't always come from above. Sometimes they come from the person who stops to help you pick up your scattered paintings on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. And don't forget to subscribe, because every day I share stories that prove love, hope, and human connection are the most powerful forces in our universe.
The last scene anyone saw that night was Ivy, asleep in the back seat of the car, clutching a new painting Megan had made just for her. It showed a young girl with paper wings, no longer preparing to jump, but soaring high above the clouds, carried by winds she'd learned to trust. At the bottom, in Megan's careful script, were the words, "For Ivy, who taught me that families aren't just born, they're created one brushstroke at a time." Back at the apartment that had become their home, 3 easels stood ready for morning. 3 sets of paintbrushes waited. 3 hearts that had been broken by loss had found their way to each other, creating art from ashes, beauty from pain, and a love story that began with scattered paintings on a hot Austin sidewalk, but would continue for all the years the universe granted them. And in the end, isn't that what we're all doing? Painting our hope onto blank canvases, launching our paper airplanes into uncertain skies, trusting that somewhere someone will see our art, our hearts, and recognize it as something worth saving. Megan Brooks had started by selling artwork to fund her chemotherapy. She ended up funding a whole new life. And all it took was one single dad who did the unthinkable. He stopped, he saw, and he chose to love. What unexpected act of kindness has changed your life? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Thank you for watching, for believing in love, and for being part of the everbellstories family. Until next time, keep launching those paper airplanes. You never know where they might land.